Hello, all. Good evening and welcome. I'm Mamta Rawat from the Corporate Communications team of CareEdge. I welcome you to our discussion today on solar equipment manufacturing, localization at the forefront. We sincerely appreciate you taking the time to join us for this webinar. We would like to welcome our esteemed guest speakers for today. Mr. Amit Paithankar, Chief Executive Officer at Waaree Energies. Mr. Kapil Maheshwari, Chief Executive Officer at Welspun New Energy. Mr. Neeraj Gupta, SVP and Head Strategy at Renew Group. Mr. Vinay Rustagi, Chief Business Officer at Premier Energies. This session will be moderated by Mr. Jatin Arya, Director at CareEdge Ratings. We will commence the session with a presentation by Mr. Mayuresh Karavade, Assistant Director at CareEdge Ratings. This will be followed by a panel discussion and a Q&A session. In case of queries, participants are requested to key in their panel. We will take up your queries at the end of the discussion. Now, may I invite Mayuresh to make the presentation.
Thank you, Mamta. Good afternoon, everyone. The topic for today's webinar is solar equipment manufacturing, localization at the forefront. India has swiftly moved from being a net importer of solar modules to emerging as a manufacturing powerhouse with over 100 gigawatt peak of installed capacity driven by rising solar installations and strong policy support. Even as uncertainties persist around export potential, a healthy project pipeline and the government's localization push through ALMM are expected to keep domestic demand buoyant. In today's webinar, we will try to understand the overall progress we have made in the solar equipment manufacturing segment, along with sector-specific trends, policies, and issues. The content flow in today's webinar includes the following: updates in the RE sector, capacity of module and cell manufacturing in India, regulatory landscape, global trade, backward integration, and CareEdge Ratings outlook on the sector. To set the context, we'll take an overview of the growth in RE capacity of India, particularly solar. As shown in Exhibit 1, the total RE capacity of India stood at 185 gigawatt as of June 2025. The solar segment is the largest contributor in the RE mix, with India's solar capacity at 116 gigawatt as of June 2025, while wind constitutes a capacity of 52 gigawatt. The rising share of RE capacity has been on account of strong policy focus, superior tariff competitiveness, and strong investor interest. The solar power segment remained the key driver of capacity addition in the RE sector, with significant capacity additions over the past 4 to 5 years, which has increased its share in the RE capacity mix to 63% as of June 2025. As shown in Exhibit 4, India installed 29 gigawatt of RE capacity in FY25, vis-a-vis 18 gigawatt added in the previous fiscal. Furthermore, RE installations surged to 12 gigawatt in Q1 FY26 itself as developers accelerated commissioning activities before 25% reduction in waiver of ISTS charges. CareEdge Ratings expects the annual RE installations to surpass 40 gigawatt over the next 3 years, primarily supported by a healthy pipeline of over 100 gigawatt. The growth in solar capacity in the medium term will be driven by annual RE tendering target of 50 gigawatt through renewable energy implementing agencies, majority of which are expected from solar, out of which sizable annual capacity additions of nearly 10 gigawatt will be contributed through rooftop solar, hybrid solar component, and off-grid solar. This apart, solar open access capacities of 4 to 5 gigawatt are likely to be added annually over the next 3 years, aided by ESG commitments of corporates and improving economic viability of C&I projects. Having seen the growth prospects of the solar power segment, we'll now dive into our topic, solar equipment manufacturing. As shown in Exhibit 5, CareEdge Ratings estimates annual domestic module production at 50 to 60 gigawatt peak, considering an effective capacity of 80 to 85 gigawatt peak, operating at 60 to 70% utilization, while the balance capacity comprises of older capacity as well as new capacity in stabilization phase. On the other hand, India's annual cell production is estimated at 8 to 10 gigawatt peak, considering an effective capacity of 11 to 13 gigawatt peak, operating at 80 to 85% utilization, resulting in cell imports dependence of 40 to 45 gigawatt peak. The accelerated growth in manufacturing capacity has been driven by rising solar installations, proactive policy support, and enhanced availability of financing avenues. India's module capacity is expected to surpass 200 gigawatt peak by FY28 end, as shown in Exhibit 6, which is 3 to 4 times India's annual average module requirement of 50 gigawatt peak over the next 3 years. As a result, CareEdge Ratings expects module production to increasingly rely on exports, even as growing cell production is also likely to marginally exceed domestic requirements over the next 3 years. The stellar growth in module capacity is expected to be driven by capacity plans of over 110 gigawatt peak by established module manufacturers and new entrants alike, which will entail a capex of over rupees 14,000 crores over the next 3 years. Domestic cell capacity is expected to witness commensurate growth to reach 100 gigawatt peak by FY28 end, largely driven by major players focusing on backward integration, with a resultant capex of over rupees 55,000 crores over the same period. We'll now look at key policies of the Indian government for the solar manufacturing sector. The government imposed cumulative duties of 27.5% and 40% on Chinese cells and modules respectively to help domestic cells and modules compete against the predatory pricing of their Chinese counterparts. The government has also mandated the procurement of domestic modules using domestically produced cells, which meet the domestic content requirement criteria, also referred to as DCR modules, for solar capacities under government funded schemes. Further, the government has mandated procurement of domestic modules only from the approved list of models and manufacturers for modules, or the ALMM1 list, for solar capacity installations in India, with ALMM2 for domestic cells to be implemented by 1st June 2026. To nurture the local solar manufacturing value chain, the government announced production linked incentives, or PLI, with a capital allocation of nearly rupees 18,000 crores for about 50 gigawatt peak across the polysilicon to module stages. We'll take a closer look at the key aspects of two important policies, PLI and ALMM. The government endeavors to promote domestic manufacturing through the PLI scheme, under which 7.4 gigawatt peak of cell plus module capacity, 16.8 gigawatt peak of deeply integrated capacity, and 27.4 gigawatt peak of fully integrated capacity has been allocated to major players for incentives of nearly rupees 18,000 crores. While the capacity buildup under PLI scheme has seen gradual advancement at wafer to module stages, overall progress has lagged allocated targets due to issues such as shortage of capital equipment and skilled labor, which are expected to be gradually ironed out. ALMM1 was initially deferred till 31st March 2024 due to insufficient local module capacity to serve the domestic requirements. Subsequently, the government brought ALMM into effect from 1st April 2024, making domestic modules mandatory for all solar projects in the country, except behind the meter and export oriented RE capacities powering green hydrogen projects, propelling the demand for domestic modules higher. Furthermore, the government has notified ALMM2 for mandatory procurement of cells, with the ALMM2 list of cell models and manufacturers aggregating to nearly 13 gigawatt peak published on 31st July 2025. The cutoff date for ALMM2 has been pegged at 31st August 2025, wherein any utility scale tenders for which bids have been submitted post the cutoff date will have to mandatorily procure domestic cells irrespective of their commissioning date. In case of open access and net metering projects, procurement of domestic cells remains mandatory for capacities commissioned on or after 1st of June 2026. While a capacity pipeline of over 50 gigawatt peak promises to augment domestic cell supply, sufficiency against the annual requirement of nearly 50 gigawatt peak by June 2026 will remain monitorable. We'll now look at India's imports and exports and how they are impacted by developments in the key global markets. As seen in Exhibit 11, Module imports by value nearly halved in FY25 and 3-month FY26 period, as against the previous periods post implementation of ALMM1. While the drop in value was largely driven by a sharp dip in prices, volumes were supported to an extent by demand from certain projects exempted from ALMM1. On the other hand, cell imports fell only marginally in FY25 and nearly doubled in 3-month FY26 as against previous periods, as seen in Exhibit 12, as growing domestic module production under ALMM1 necessitated higher cell imports, also at lower prices owing to Chinese oversupply in global markets. When it comes to exports, it's pertinent to talk about USA and its trade policies as it constitutes over 95% of India's module exports. In recent months, the Donald Trump administration has introduced stricter policies aimed at curbing renewable energy incentives as well as solar imports. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act has limited the availability of investment and production tax credits only for projects commenced by 4th July 2026 or commissioned by 31st December 2027. Under the Foreign Entities of Concern or FEOC restrictions, the Act has also curtailed the tax credits for entities exhibiting ownership, sourcing, or licensing with enlisted countries, including China. The anti-dumping and countervailing investigations against Southeast Asian nations in 2024 had resulted in high duties, effectively shutting them out of the US market. At the behest of the Alliance for American Solar Manufacturing and Trade, comprising of US-based solar manufacturers, the US International Trade Commission has initiated an ADD-CVD investigation into exports from India along with Indonesia and Laos, which is expected to conclude by December 2025 and could result in up to 214% duties on Indian solar exports into US. Under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, the US administration is investigating the impact of Chinese polysilicon in solar imports and evaluating tariffs or quotas on such imports, which could effectively make them less cost competitive. Moreover, the Trump administration has introduced reciprocal tariffs on most trading partners, as shown in Exhibit 13, including a cumulative 50% tariff on India, effective from 27th August 2025, in addition to the 14.25% tariff under Section 201, applicable till January 2026. While the reciprocal tariffs have been invalidated by the US Court of Appeals on 29th August 2025, uncertainty prevails as these will remain in place up to 14th October 2025, till which date the US administration has been allowed to appeal in Supreme Court. We shall now take a look at the trend for Indian exports, which are largely directed into the US. As shown in Exhibits 14 and 15, Indian module and cell exports fell 40 to 45% in FY25 as against FY24 due to UFLPA scrutiny on Indian modules. However, Indian module exports to US have rebounded in the 3-month FY26 period, driven by uncertainty around reciprocal tariffs and RE tax credit restrictions imposed by the Trump administration. Indian cell exports, nonetheless, remained muted in the same period as cell manufacturers preferred servicing the domestic market for DCR modules at healthy realizations. Export prospects to the US may seem clouded in the near term by trade tensions and the ADD-CVD investigation. However, a relatively nascent supply chain in US and progressive decoupling with China may augur well for Indian exporters in the medium term, given the margins for DCR modules in the US market are nearly 2 to 3 times of domestic margins. Now let's look at price trends prevailing in the domestic market vis-a-vis imported modules. As shown in Exhibit 16, landed imported module prices continued their downward trajectory from 19 cents per watt peak in July 2024 to 15 cents per watt peak in July 2025 on account of persistent overcapacity in China. Likewise, a similar dip in cell prices has lowered the landed cost of domestic modules. Although imported modules remain cheaper than domestic modules by nearly 25% despite the applicable duties, non-tariff barriers and government-sponsored schemes are likely to spur demand for domestic modules. Domestic non-DCR module prices have seen a modest increase in FY26 owing to anti-dumping duties on input materials such as aluminium frames and solar glass. We shall now look at some policy changes that have been afoot in the largest solar equipment market, China. Chinese players and the government have orchestrated an effort to curb oversupply and the resultant pricing pressure through various measures. The industry association and government enterprises have debarred procurement bids priced below the benchmark production cost of 9.5 cents per watt peak in large state tenders to restore orderly pricing. The Chinese government announced a reduction in export tax rebate on solar cells and modules from 13% to 9% to curb below cost export pricing. Chinese polysilicon majors have so far implemented two rounds of voluntary production cuts aimed at pushing prices up towards sustainable levels and have further proposed a government aided buyout plan worth 50 billion Chinese yuan or 7 billion US dollars to retire one third of China's approximately 3 million ton polysilicon capacity. These measures have reflected in prices of upstream components from polysilicon to cells as seen in Exhibit 17, although price correction has lagged at the module stage due to overcapacity and restricted market access to US and India. While such upstream cost fluctuations can be passed on by most Indian manufacturers under variable contracts, thereby minimizing margin impact, they also highlight the need for backward integration by Indian players to insulate themselves from input volatility and supply chain risks. Having understood the significance of backward integration for Indian manufacturers, we shall now look at developments in the Indian market aimed at achieving the same. Given that global ingot wafer capacity is dominated by China, Indian players are currently dependent on China and Southeast Asian nations for wafer supply. While India's operational wafer capacity is currently limited to 2 gigawatt peak, major Indian players have announced a pipeline of over 30 gigawatt peak to be operationalized over the next 3 to 5 years with an estimated capex of over rupees 20,000 crores. Considering the strategic importance of wafer supply, the Indian government has awarded wafer capacity of nearly 40 gigawatt peak under the PLI scheme and may consider the next leg of ALMM for ingot wafers basis the capacity development. However, challenges such as lack of skilled manpower and dependence on China for machinery and technology need to be overcome to achieve this objective. To promote adoption of Indian-made cells, the government has mandated procurement of domestic cells under ALMM 2. Although tenders closed until 31st August 2025 have been exempted, any utility scale tenders closed thereafter, and any open access or net metering capacities commissioned 1st June 2026 onwards will have to mandatorily procure DCR modules. Considering the price differential of 5 to 6 cents per watt peak for DCR modules vis-a-vis non-DCR modules, plain vanilla solar tariffs are expected to see an increase of 30 to 40 paise per unit from prevailing levels of rupees 2.5 per unit, while the increase could be lower for hybrid or storage-based capacities given the smaller share of solar capacity in the overall project configuration. To put CareEdge Ratings sectoral view in a nutshell, the solar equipment manufacturing sector has many tailwinds such as healthy domestic demand outlook, maturing module capacities, proactive policy support, and improved lenders' appetite for RE projects. However, lack of integrated solar capacity, supply chain dependence on China, uncertainty shrouding export prospects, and delay in RE capacity additions due to systemic issues are some headwinds that remain monitorable over the medium term. Thank you. I will now hand it back to Mamta.
Thank you, Mayuresh. Attendees are requested to key in their questions, which we will take up after our panel discussion. Now, may I invite Jatin Arya to take over the session, please? Jatin is Director, Infrastructure Sector at CareEdge Ratings and specializes in handling the energy sector portfolio. He holds bachelor's degree in business studies from Shahid Sukhdev College of Business Studies, Delhi University, and PGDM from Management Development Institute, Gurgaon. He also holds a master's degree in European business from ESCP, Paris. He has industry experience of more than 12 years in the credit ratings domain. Prior to joining CareEdge Ratings, he was working as an assistant vice president in the ratings division at ICRA. Over to you, Jatin.
Yeah, thank you, Mamta, for the quick introduction, and Mayuresh for the wonderful, deck presentation. Good evening and a very warm welcome to one and all who have joined us for today's webinar on solar equipment manufacturing sector. We have today with us undoubtedly, some of the best minds from the industry to deliberate on this subject and share their valuable perspectives with us. I would like to introduce you all to our esteemed panelists in the alphabetical order. So we have with us our first panelist, that is Dr. Amit Paithankar from Waaree Energies Limited. He's a whole-time director and CEO of Waaree Energies Limited, wherein he is responsible for leading the overall operations of the company, and he has successfully led them in becoming one of the leading module and cell manufacturing companies in India. He's a PhD in electrical engineering from University of Mumbai and an MBA from London Business School. Prior to joining Waaree, he has held leadership positions, notably in ABB and Emerson. And in his professional career, he has operated across, a very diverse geographic locations, including India, Asia Pacific, European Union, and the US. Welcome, Dr. Amit. So next panelist is Mr. Kapil Maheshwari from Welspun New Energy. With a career spanning of over 20 years in renewable energy, Kapil has spent over 13 years in leadership positions with prominent organizations, and he is specialized in renewables and green hydrogen space. He has worked with some leading corporates like Reliance Industries Limited, Hinduja Renewables, Mahindra Sustain, among others. He is presently leading renewables and green energy development at Welspun. Prior to this, he was primarily, leading RIL's initiatives in the renewable energy and green hydrogen development space, wherein he was also responsible for, setting up their solar manufacturing division. Prior to that, he was also working as the CEO of Hinduja Renewables. In terms of his achievements, he has featured in the list of 40 under 40 and top 100 leaders in the solar industry. That's a list that's been published by Solar Quarter. And by qualification, Kapil is an engineer. He holds a master's degree in electrical engineering from IIT Mumbai, and he holds an MBA degree from IIM Bangalore. Welcome, Kapil. Our third panelist for today's session is Mr. Neeraj Gupta from Renew Group. Neeraj has an experience of almost 2 decades in the industry in varying roles, some of which include business development, project monitoring, procurement, commercial and regulatory divisions of leading corporates. Currently, he is working as a senior vice president, strategy and commercial, and head of the solar manufacturing division at Renew Group. Prior to Renew, he's worked with renowned corporates like PwC and Sun Edison. Welcome, Neeraj. Welcome to our webinar. Lastly, let me introduce you to our fourth esteemed panelist, Chief Business Officer of Premier Energies Limited, Mr. Vinay Rustagi. Vinay leads the business strategy, investments, and government policy functions at Premier Energies. Prior to this, he had clean energy advisory and research. He used to lead the clean energy advisory and research business at CRISIL, and he had co-founded Bridge to India platform, which was engaged in advising project developers, investors, equipment suppliers, and policymakers on issues related to the renewable energy industry. Vinay has spent over 16 years as a financer. He has covering, renewable energy, transport, infra sectors across Europe and Asia. His job stints includes roles at Standard Chartered Bank, National Australia Bank, SMBC, among others. From a qualification point of view, Vinay holds dual MBA degrees from London Business School and IIM Ahmedabad, in addition to holding a mechanical engineering degree from DTU, that is Delhi Technological University. It's a pleasure to have you, Vinay.
Thank you for having me, Jatin.
Yeah. So now for a few, preliminary remarks before I get in the panelists. So the Indian, as Mayuresh highlighted, the Indian solar equipment manufacturing sector is actually how I see it is it's at a inflection point. On the one hand, we are witnessing, unprecedented momentum with players announcing significant capacity additions across the value chain, right from polysilicon to wafers, cells, and modules. And this expansion is not just about scaling numbers, but it is also about building a robust and a resilient ecosystem that supports India's long-term renewable energy ambitions. Government initiatives such as the PLI scheme, BCD, ALMM, these are nothing the industry actually towards localization and self-sufficiency. And at the same time, we see that private participants are committing substantial capital, signaling confidence in the sector's future. Yet, there are certain challenges that remain in the form of supply chain vulnerabilities, heavy dependence on imports for critical raw materials and machinery, evolving trade relationships, especially with China and US, which are the key players. And then there is across the value chain, there are some technological gaps that the Indian OEMs has as compared to the global players. So against this backdrop, the big question that comes to my mind is that can India truly achieve Atmanirbharta or self-sufficiency across the equipment value chain? And if yes, how soon? So with this thought rather, I would like to invite our esteemed panel of experts to share their perspectives on what lies ahead regarding the opportunities, bottlenecks, and the realistic roadmap for India to emerge as a global hub for solar manufacturing. So let me begin the conversation by having Dr. Paithankar first. So, India's installed module manufacturing capacity has actually now crossed 100 gigawatt mark with another significant chunk under implementation. Now, when we compare this with India's, domestic requirement, module requirement is expected to remain closer to 45 to 50 gigawatt peak. So there seems to be a growing risk of oversupply of modules in the near to medium term. As a large player, how do you see this situation unfolding? Do you genuinely see some oversupply risk, or do you feel that the export market and downstream demand would actually balance this out? Just wanted to get in your views on this, sir.
Jatin, thank you very much, first of all, for having me. Um, and it'll be an interesting discussion on these various topics that you have laid out. And Mayuresh did a phenomenal job in zooming out and showing us where the sector is. Um, so I'll just take up the first layer that I would like to kind of talk about is the demand itself, and then we'll go on the supply side. So you're right, the demand is in the region of 40 to 50 gigawatts right now. And I would say by the turn of this decade, might potentially go to, somewhere around maybe 70 to 80 gigawatts. And so um, with those numbers, um, and module capacity looks like it's totally measured up, but it's not, because one is gigawatt peak and the other one is what is the power that is needed to be available for the grid. So there's a roughly 1.3 to 1.35 sort of times difference there. And then when you also put in say about 10 to 15% of utilization efficiency of any given plant, you can add another 0.1 or 0.15 to it. So there will still be a reasonable gap, I would say, between supply and demand. They would measure up a little bit, but there will still be a bit of a headroom. And this is purely from policy, from modules perspective. The important part is sales is going to become an intrinsically important component, and to sell to the majority of the Indian market, you will need to have cell manufacturing, equivalent cell manufacturing of ALMM for cells, and that's a reality. And again, Mayuresh talked about the dates. Given that, it's cell manufacturing becomes that much more important, and the trajectory is going to continue towards ingots and wafers. So, which brings me to the second layer as to how is this industry going to evolve. The industry will evolve to a point where you will have the need for cells manufacturing, also ingots and wafers, and eventually even polysilicon. So I think that integration will be the way in which this whole industry will evolve. And you will find that for this whole entire integrated play, this will move to more of an oligopoly as opposed to kind of market that we see at this stage.
Very interesting point. So perhaps you are hinting at some kind of a consolidation taking place in the near to medium term. Maybe let's hear from the other OEM on the panel. Vinay, maybe you could share some views on the same question.
Sure, Jatin. So, I largely concur with what Amit said. See, I think, a lot of people are, getting worried about the overcapacity in the module manufacturing space. But, to be honest, that is the simplest part of the whole value chain. It is the least capital intensive part of the whole value chain. So it is a business with very, very low entry barriers and requires very small ticket size. Increasingly, as we go as the sector evolves from ALMM 1 to 2 and sometime in the future to ALMM 3, backward integration is going to drive the sector. And all these people, the manufacturers with only limited module manufacturing capacity, they are going to get stranded. So I think what we have to in fact look at going forward is who are the people with nearly matched cell and module capacity. They are the ones likely to do well. The second thing, even if you look at the module manufacturers in isolation, sure, we have 100 gigawatts plus of capacity, but then you have to actually, do a second and third tier of analysis to see who are the various players. You have to segment them in different categories. Segment them by capacity, segment them by technology, and the background and the track record in the sector. And the reason I say that is that despite overcapacity and sector operating at, let's say, an average capacity utilization of 25% or so, our lines are running at nearly full capacity utilization. The reason for that is the large IPP clients, they don't want to work with each and every single module manufacturer in the country. They want to work with companies with scale, track record, bankability, etc. And if you look at the sector in those terms, then there are not more than, I would say, 8, maximum 10 module suppliers who meet the financial and the operating specifications of the IPP clients, right? So, and then suddenly, if you look at it from that lens, the overcapacity suddenly starts looking much smaller. So I think because of that, we are not particularly concerned with the overcapacity in module supply. I think it is the backward integration, the cell capacity, and increasingly ingot and wafers, which is going to drive the market.
Indeed, thanks, Vinay, for your elaborate response. In fact, we also believe that, cell manufacturing capacity is the next step in the value chain, wherein, as a country, we lag significantly, and which may be a key factor, perhaps, behind the postponement of even ALMM2. With this context in mind, let's now turn our attention to how, procurement mandates like ALMM2 have influenced the market landscape. And now let me, get in Kapil. He is representing a developer and user of these products. So my question to you is that, with MNRE's this notified cutoff date for ALMM2 now behind us, only DCR compliant modules can be sourced for utility scale projects regardless of their commissioning timelines. Now going forward. Now this raises a couple of important questions. Now, given the supply of DCR compliant modules is still relatively limited, there may be module capacity, but as Dr. Amit and Vinay highlighted, cell capacity is something wherein we lack. So that may affect the DCR, module availability. So do you actually anticipate some delays in project commissioning as a result of this constraint A? And the second part is, since DCR modules also come at a higher cost, do you see these challenges? Do you see challenges flowing on to, use the developers in securing financing or passing on these costs to the off-takers? So your take on this.
Thanks, Jatin. Thanks for having me here, CareEdge. I heard Amit and Vinay. Uh, Fortunately, I've been on both the sides. So, largely on the other side, I would say, possibly would have set up cell factories much before, cell factories started in India as part of my career. Uh, I would slightly deviate from the question what you've asked. Uh, while I can definitely provide a developer's perspective, but let me start with the first the developer's perspective on that. Uh, the ultimate aim for a renewable capacity addition is twofold. First, we achieve that 500 gigawatt target, and at the same time, two, we are much better placed possibly in terms of tariffs compared to the fossil. So we are able to provide the most solar possibly right now is the most competitive tariff or the power generation ways we have in the country right now. So, and that helps majority of industries and not just one part of the industry. We should not leave that fact out. Second is on the backward integration. I believe PLI scheme, if you talk for the backward integration, which you presented, Mayuresh also provided. As per PLI scheme, by November 2024, the entire polysilicon to module manufacturing should have come by now. So we have to admit the fact where we stand compared to the global competition or the benchmark compared to where we are in terms of backward integration with facts, not with emotions. Fact remains that what we have addressed is largely a module capacity which does not involve much of technology, and for that also majority of plant and machinery comes from outside India. So we haven't indigenized even the plant and machinery to that extent. Second fact I would say is, I believe when we are addressing the backward integration now from ingot wafer cell, we are primarily driven by the technology which is prevalent now. And there's a big technology shift which is happening. And by the time we make our factories up and running, there'll be tandems, which would be the most commercialized technology in China. And what gets commercialized in China would be the flavor to the world. So that's developers' perspective also, that we will not have an option to achieve higher efficiencies and reduction in the balance of system cost at those times when tandems would be available at the same price at the cost of DCR modules. So overall tariffs would not be that first attractive, second higher, third you will always have a constraint from developers of issues what you also presented, that back-to-back PSAs are not getting signed. And when globally tandem would be available at the price of Topcon, which everybody is targeting right now, we will be again in a similar spot what we are right now. So the lack of manufacturing sector for the forward-looking aspect in the R&D largely remains a question, and that's coming from a developer because that is the need of an hour. We should look at that. Indigenization of the plant and machinery is again an aspect which manufacturers should look at it. For your question on developers' view of DCR versus non-DCR, I always believe till we do in backward integration and we do that, it will be difficult to develop in power sector market for us going forward. So we should definitely look at backward integration. We have examples from other sectors where India has possibly done more than any other country in the world. Low-cost automotive is a live example. So we have the examples of doing leapfrog present. So I am hopeful that by the time these projects of after August 31st bidding comes online, we will have sufficient backward integration already in place to address the needs of developers as well.
Got it. Got it. Let me also get in Neeraj in the conversation. So, Neeraj, when the first, I wanted to, check with you, even, Kapil made a brief reference to the PLI, how the capacities have lagged, from their initial schedule. When the first tranche of PLI scheme for solar manufacturing was announced, the expectation was that the capacities awarded to the corporates would have become operational by now. However, on ground, we have seen only limited progress. From your perspective, what have been the key impediments holding back this rollout? And importantly, do you see these challenges being resolved in the near term so that the promised capacity can start contributing meaningfully, and it would actually lead to availability of DCR modules or DCR, cells, DCR wafers, and so on? So your view on that, Neeraj?
Yeah, so I think the PLI, once first it was announced, I think it was a very ambitious scheme. Obviously, government wanted to do all the four value additions which are there in the value chain of a solar industry all at once. So I think in terms of thought process, government has also evolved over a period of time. I think so. When they launched the PLI scheme, obviously they were very strict in many parameters. Like everything need to be done parallelly, everything need to be done in 3 years. The challenges were not well understood. The scheme was rolled out, people bid aggressively, they won the capacities, but obviously on ground execution was much less than what was expected, right? So that is a fact. Now, what was the positive about it? Obviously, the lower value chain, which required less investments, which were less complex, they were kind of adopted by the people, and those implementation we also saw in the market. And that too also not just because of the PLI alone, that was a multiple interventions which were required. Like in parallel, you have to have a tariff barrier in place, a non-tariff barrier like ALMM in place. Unless you have those kind of a supporting mechanism in addition to a PLI, those sectors do not pick up. So module picked up lately, largely because of first there was a tariff barrier of 40%. At that time, people thought it is adequate. Later, then the module prices in China went to such a low level, then 40% also become some kind of a question mark. And therefore, ALMM, which is a non-tariff barrier, was the only key in which the industry could basically survive and then can compete even domestically when the barrier was a non-tariff. So I think the similar thing we saw in the cell. The 25% tariff barrier came at that time, it looked good. The Chinese cell were also trading at around 12 cents, 9 to 12 cents, and people thought we can make it at around the 14 range and 25% should be good enough. But over a course of period, obviously the price dropped to 3 cents, then 25% was not enough. ALMM came into the play, right? So I think it is a combination of multiple interventions which are required to fight the dumping, right? So it is not just the economics on ground, right? It also is a strategy for that sector globally, how it is playing out, and how you are reacting to that strategy to make manufacturing in India successful. So it's a much larger piece which need to be solved just by the PLI. I think is one of the supporting pillar, but not the only supporting pillar which can make it happen. So I think this now the learning for the industry and the government as a result of it is right. Now they understand, right? The wafer will come up in India. Many people have given representations. Similarly, it is 2 cents somewhere in China, right? In India, it will require around 5 to 6 cents. So anywhere like 150 or 200% of tariff will be required, which I think sometimes looks like a very large figure to put as a tariff. So I think the only way to is to give a forward-looking outward statement, which MNRE is very confident that they will issue in like next 1 to 2 months. And therefore, I think the investment on ground will start happening because bankers will not understand it fully unless they see a paper and document which the government is supporting the sector, and there is a forward looking statement from the government itself. And then therefore you will start to see many investors and the bankers will start kind of putting a faith that this will come up in say 2028, and you will see the investment happening in ingot and wafer. So say that this is a journey upwards and backwards up to the mining, not just the polysilicon, but it will go up to metallurgical grade polysilicon, and it will go to the mining as well. Unless you have control over the resources, which is raw materials. You know what happened in magnet very recently, right? Your automobile on EV was put at stake once they see that the raw material can also be a driver where they can screw you up. So I think you have to go backward, one, to the extent of from the earth, right? And second is that you have to understand that what is the methodology and how you're going to approach the problem. So it is a multifaceted. So 2 or 3 intervention will make it happen in India. We have seen two segments which India has been able to kind of now get to some level, and our second segment cell is expanding rapidly. And I think people are just waiting for some forward looking statements on the wafer and ingot. I think many people which are big, right? They have already have a plan, they have a land, and then they are very ready to for investment. Just a trigger point is required. So I think it has been a journey for the government, for the industry. Everyone was very ambitious in the beginning. Now they understand the reality and they know the what is the methodology to beat the global master in this supply chain, and how to approach that problem rather than saying, yeah, we will defeat them. But how to defeat them, I think they are understanding it gradually.
Got it. Got it. Thanks, Neeraj, for your response. I'd move on to Dr. Paithankar. I mean, just carry on that PLI related question. While, there have been these delays that we've been talking, do you actually see, developers, sorry, rather the OEMs coming up with the promised capacity in PLIs, or do you feel that there will be a lot of relinquishments, etc., at an industry level? Not speaking from a company's point of view, what is your view on the industry? The PLI based capacity, will it see the light of the day?
No, it'll definitely see the light of the day. And again, I'm restricting my comments to broadly the industry. Um, if you really look at major components that make up this industry, you're seeing that in a steadfast manner, various parts of the value chain are being put in place. And I think Neeraj really delineated it very, very well. Whilst we started with the gusto, these things take time, and you need to stabilize first the modules. I mean, modules. I think it was Kapil who talked about the fact, and I think even Vinay said that modules is the easiest part of the whole equation in terms of just the capital that is required and so on and so forth. But even that was not easy, right, to start with. And then the next complexity levels is cells, of course, ingots and wafers. But various types of tariff and non-tariff barriers are being put in place, and we will clearly see, like I said in my earlier commentary here, we will evolve towards an oligopoly, because the requirements of capital will continue to keep growing. The type of people that you need to run these factories will keep growing. Kapil also brought in an extremely important component, um, which is research and development. And I mean, for instance, tandem cells, right? You need to be ready with tandem cells technology today. And of course, MNRE is doing that. IIT Bombay is pretty much a part of it. Many of the industry majors are actually within India also trying to be proactive to ensure that, when that technology becomes prime time, that we are there and we are not left out. So the answer to that question is it might not be at the initially anticipated speed, but we'll definitely get there, probably in the next, I would say, couple of years' time.
Got it. Just before posing the next question, I wanted to inform the participants that we shall be taking questions from the audience in a short while. Meanwhile, I would like to request the participants to key in their questions in the panel. While the questions come in, I have a few more questions up my sleeves, and I'll, go ahead with them. So, I mean, how I see this situation unfolding is, the challenges surrounding technology localization have actually contributed towards, the slow progress of PLI. But one important aspect is, the India-China relationship seem to be improving, and this actually brings in some more optimism. So I wanted to, bring Vinay in and check with him, the challenges that have persisted in terms of, getting backward integration assurance. So we have heard that, Indian cell capacity development in particular faced hurdles around onshoring of, Chinese technology and skilled manpower. First of all, to what extent have these issues been resolved right now? And now going on to the next step, even though, both Kapil and Neeraj did mention it somewhere in their remarks, when we actually go back to wafers and polysilicon, do you see some more bottlenecks cropping up, or do you feel that now most of it is, perhaps at a stage wherein developers can see greener pastures? The OEMs rather can see greener pastures. Yeah.
Sure, Jatin. So, the fact of the matter is that China has a near complete hegemony, or rather, monopoly in the ingot and wafer business. 98% plus of the global capacity is based in China. And while the local manufacturers in India, that we've been able to kind of get over all the technology issues in the cell business by and large, I can assure you that when we go to ingots and wafers, some of those issues are likely to resurface. I mean, that's just simply the truth of the matter. So I think, and it will be up to the government as well as each of us to find the best way to navigate that uncertainty. Definitely, an improvement in India-China relationship helps. And it is very important that we do successfully implement the planned ingot and wafer capacities, because that's just one more step in indigenizing the solar value chain. So I think smart companies will do a lot of things. There are, while the technology is predominantly in China, there are suppliers. There is an engineering expertise which is outside China also, although of course it is more expensive. So I think we will all have to find our own solutions in terms of partnerships, alliances, vendor relationships, etc., to navigate that period of uncertainty.
Got it. Got it. Uh, so as we discuss backward integration up to polysilicon, it is equally important to also stay aligned with the rapidly evolving technology landscape, which is actually evident from the swift industry transition. We have almost transitioned from a monopoly to a top-con regime. And Kapil did mention, new technology coming in. So maybe Kapil and Neeraj can bring in their thoughts for the next question. So in this context, I wanted to check with them. Now Reliance is working on the HJT technology. Kapil might have been involved, in its inception and all, in the planning stage. Just wanted to check with them. Given these, how do you see these the new technologies coming over? India is a very cost, focused market, and perhaps initially these new technologies would bring in some higher production cost. How quickly do you think that India is likely to transition towards these? So if perhaps our people in the audience could get a trajectory that by when you expect the next technology shift, that would be pretty helpful. So maybe Neeraj and Kapil can come in with their thoughts on this.
Uh, Kapil, you go first.
I mean, OEMs may not like, but I think we are largely behind other places for that, and we are an adopter of in technology rather than an innovator of in technology. That's the fact. What remains right now. Having said that, I firmly believe that the skill set and the mindset exist within the Indian ecosystem. You look at the companies which have bid for the PLI also with the complete backward integration. Each of them is completely capable to set up something like that. And just to add what Neeraj said, if you evaluate, you can get quartz mining in India. You can produce metallurgical silicon in India, and the but the complexities in the process are not simple. It will not be like the way you have seen some of these developers venturing into module production. It will not be simple. uh, but for some companies which have larger exposure in otherwise running chemical industries with large reactors, would be able to see some day of light because they have the requisite uh, wallet size, cash available, access to capital, and the some of their manpower can be shifted to quickly adopt the technology trends, which we can do that. So I am still hopeful that it will happen. Uh, Only drag is it will take more time compared to what was envisaged, while we were putting up PLIs, etc.
Got it. Neeraj, quick views on this question.
Yeah, so I think on technology proofing, what I will say is in terms of manufacturing at least, the metallurgical silicon mining, polysilicon, and wafer up to ingot wafering, right? There is less of technological risk. So I think if you put up an investment, you can easily kind of say that they will have a long life. They will have a 25-year life or a 30-year life. So even beyond, the polysilicon plants are running for 50 years and more also. So you can have a very, very long amortization period. The only thing is you should still have a policy to kind of invest into it, because they are not going to die that soon. The purity level in polysilicon has been increasing, but that has also stabilized. Even a semiconductor require 9 to 12, and solar are also producing the same, like 9 is something what they are going for. So I think there is a less of technology risk in first 3 or 4 value chains. Most of the technology risk is in actually in cells, where you are saying that JT will come, or tandem will come, or earlier it was monoperg, now it is topcon. So all the technology risk basically is actually sitting at a level of a cell. So I think in terms of manufacturing, if we have to see a value chain, you go and invest, you even adopt a technology, or you do a processing plant only, even if you don't have a technology. I think the most of the risk generally you have to see that you have to control technology shifts in the cell, the R&D and other things that you have to do. Probably focus first on the highest element where there is a highest risk of shifting. That is from the manufacturing perspective. Module, anyways, is assembly, so people will figure it out how to assemble whatever temperature. HJT is a low temperature shouldering, etc. Some challenges are there, but I think not to a level of cell, which actually are a diffusion processes, which changes the chemistry of the cell itself. So it is a more complex value chain, which the cell element holds. In terms of, I think, developer side, I think they are more interested in basically when the technology transition is happening, right? And what is the efficiency level they are going to see in the future. So I think we have to go a bit backward into the history to understand that the technology shifts has not happened that quickly in the past as well. So Germany and other people were producing this monoperk, okay, in 2000, in 2001, 2002, 2003. And then basically when China entered into this market of solar, they brought back the multi. They said it is
Got
a
it.
easier process. It's a very simpler process. Do it in the bulk. They didn't have a pooling technology at that point in time at scale. And then if you see the market, which was actually 50-50% somewhere in 2005, between perk and the multi, it shifted 100% to multi, and people started using looking at a solar only 2012 and 13. People started looking at solar more seriously in India, and they always thought that the multi is a technology which is actually the technology right now, and it will come, the perk will come later. Okay, but that was not a case. At some point in time, 50% of the market was perk and multi in 2005, when it was a very very small market. But it, when the market increased, it shifted towards the multi, because China just scaled up multi at a very low cost, and the perk died. Okay, and then when
Understood.
China developed a technology which was perk, and which was a crystal technology, then they scaled up the crystal technology, and then the perk came in. My only point here, the limited point, is that the transition of technology was not between 2012 to 2015 and 2015 to 2020, and then we are saying 2020 to 2025, which is now going to topcon. Actually the transition was much longer, much larger. Okay,
Got
so
it.
people were not able to solve the problems in 1 to 3 years. So the
Understood.
longevity of the technology is higher than what is thought in the market. That is my fundamental
Fair enough.
answer to this. So it will long. So Topcon is
Yeah.
not going away before
Yeah.
2030, 32. And HJT probably will become viable at some point in 29, 30, and going beyond. And Tandem is even beyond. So
Mm.
people are not going to solve the problem very quickly. It is going to take time.
Understood.
Yeah.
Got it. Thanks, Neeraj, for such a wonderful response. Now, I had more questions up my sleeves, but we are actually running out of time. I would rather just pose one very important question to Amit, and then move. Sabyasachi will take over. There are a few questions from the participants. My question, Amit, is on the exports side. So, India's solar exports to US have been facing multiple headwinds, right? From, UF LPA compliance requirements to reduce tax credits, and now the ongoing tariff and ADD, CVD investigations. Against this backdrop, a very quick word from you. Does US still remain an attractive export destination? I'm talking about US in terms of exporting from India, not setting up capacities over there. So do you still feel that's still a very important market, or do you feel that OEMs will now be compelled to diversify into other geographies as well?
So a great question, Jatin. So one needs to make a determination in terms of overall broad numbers, right? The amount of investment that US is going to do in artificial intelligence over the next 3 years is $1 trillion. On a very conservative basis, almost 25% of that is going to be for power. So about $250 billion will need to get into power. And that power will be needed in the next 2 to 3 years' time. Now, which are the candidates of technology that can be providing power in the next 2 to 3 years' time? Nuclear will take, even for an SMR, which is the flavor of the day, is going to take still 5 to 6 years. And really, there are only two SMRs right now in existence. One is in Russia and the other one is in China. And two new ones which are coming also once again in Russia and in China. So SMRs and nuclear is going to take time. Any gas-based, coal-based, or oil-based, it's going to take conservatively 5 years, 4 to 5 years to be deployed, right? So you're left with renewable as a candidate, and solar is the biggest contributor to that. So solar with BESS, battery energy storage system, is really the only real practical alternative left to power the power-hungry infrastructure that is being set up not only in the US but across the world. And so therefore, US continues to be a very, very solid, extremely important market for any significant player in this industry. From an India perspective, at this point in time, because of the various nuances of the US law, one can participate in the US market despite tariffs and all of that, because according to US law, the important aspect to understand here is US determines the country of origin of the module as where the cell is made, right? And so you can have your supply chain fairly dexterous to ensure that you're sourcing the cells from the right spaces, and that way participate in the US market. So exports from India to the US continue, and I think they will be required. Number one. Number two, and you said that you made that as a constraint set, but I would say Indian manufacturers should actively consider manufacturing in the US and expanding in the US, because it's a very important market, a very, very large, extremely important market, and therefore these two reasons we should always be interested in the US.
Got it. Great to hear that. I'll just hand it over to Sabyasachi. There are a few questions from the audience, and we are extending this, conversation by 5-10 minutes. So we'll quickly, take these questions and conclude.
Yeah,
Sabyasachi.
thanks, Jatin, and thanks to all the panelists for taking the time out for this. There are lots of questions in the question box, but fortunately, many of them have already been taken up during the course of the discussion. So I'll take up those which have not been handled yet. Now, there's one question which where one of the participants asks whether the module manufacturers will also get into BESS because it's a requirement of the day, or will it be a different value chain handled by a different set of players? Any of the manufacturers would like to take this?
So again, we are trying to keep it specific company agnostic, but this question would be difficult to say specific.
It was for specific companies, but obviously I would not take it. So
no.
you
So as
think
Waaree, as Waaree, we consider our spine to be solar, but we are definitely expanding into the adjacencies. So we are definitely coming up with battery energy storage systems. In fact, our first line, and I'm just traveling on the Mumbai-Ahmedabad highway. So our first pilot line is actually, the factory is being made ready as we speak. So you will find more and more manufacturers getting more and more interested in the overall energy transition value chain, which will include batteries, which will include inverters, which will include transformers, and we are planning to get into all of those.
There's one question from Mr. Sunny Kumar who asked for the view on availability of solar glasses in the country, and there's another one which talks about stringers, but stringers being expensive and relatively less available. Any views on that? I mean, availability of solar glass and stringers in the market for the module industry.
Okay, I will take that. So solar glass, obviously the tariff has been just put in December last year, and obviously the tariffs are quite aggressive. So people see a lot of value in putting up a solar glass. And I think some of the movement we have seen, obviously, current capacity is around 12 gigawatts, all put together, which India can produce. But I think in next 2 to 3 years, 3 years of time, we will see it expanding up to like matching the module capacity. So currently, people might be seeing a shortage because the tariffs have come in December, and obviously the capacities take like 3 years for the solar glass to come in. But there are lot many expansions without naming, but you can find on the social media where people have posted who are interested in putting up the solar glass. Many of the manufacturers itself are putting up the solar glass, and some of the people who are actually into the solar glass specifically, they are expanding. So easily we can see that it will match your solar capacity somewhere around 28, somewhere around 28. But because not before that, because it takes time. Solar glass is around 2.5 to 3 year process to set it up. So the shortage will remain in the short term for 3 years, and after that, you will probably see a market imbalance.
Thanks. There's one question from Mr. Rikin Mistry. He asks, the solar manufacturing process is fairly energy intensive. So, how does the industry manage the current high energy cost? And is it really much higher than China?
You are saying for manufacturing of a
Yeah,
glass,
for
or you are
manufacturing, because the manufacturing process itself requires some amount of energy. So the question, from this, participant audience is that they want to know whether, our energy costs are higher than those of other China and other places where they are doing the manufacturing, and what are the manufacturers doing to manage the energy costs?
Let me take a shot at it. I think it's a great question. The answer to that is our costs are certainly higher than many of the other nations, which include China and the United States. Um, Across states, I mean, we have operations in Gujarat, we have operations in Maharashtra. So wherever you look at, I mean, overall, it's higher. It has to be tackled with a combination of factors. I mean, we use renewable energy, which is actually getting lower and lower, and that also helps you in overall, bringing your carbon footprint down also, and be competitive in markets like Europe. So there are creative ways of doing that. The other way also is to work with the respective state governments and see if you are able to strike a good deal to have power tariffs which are comparable to the countries like China and the United States. Um, I think it's an equation which is solvable and is extremely important to be solved, especially when we are moving towards ingots, wafers, and polysilicon.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I think the most energy intensive process in the whole value chain is basically polysilicon and ingot and wafers. And there, as the government looks set to announce a new policy, we definitely expect the government to tackle this issue, either by way of giving some kind of a discount on the grid tariffs, or possibly, for example, allowing a greater penetration of renewable power from the open access route. So that definitely needs to be tackled, and we hope that the due action will be taken shortly.
Yeah, I just add one last question because we are running out of time. This is from Mr. Jatin Arya. Since you mentioned about the energy intensive part of the process, polycyclic, etc. His question is: does India have silica of the quality that's required for making polysilicon?
So I
yeah, yeah.
think
Answer
the
is
issue. Sorry, go on, Neeraj. You go on,
yeah,
please.
yeah. So if his question is about the mining material like quartz, yes, it is there.
Okay. So these are very high purity quartz which is required, right, for the manufacture of.
If it you have to add more steps to if you have a low quality as well. But yeah, you are correct. So but that quartz is available in India. That I can tell you. Some of the Chinese players who we have spoken to, in fact, very very high quality quartz which is required for even boats and other things. They are saying some of the quartz even go from India to China also. So the quartz is there in India.
Yeah,
Okay.
actually, it's one of those rare supply chains where we can actually own it end to end as a country.
Okay.
Yes. Well, some of
That's
the areas
great
we are
to, it's
lagging, like
quite great to hear
lithium and
that.
other things. The purity of lithium is not too good, which has been found in deposits. But that is, I think, another problem which will come to when we go into cell manufacturing in BESS, not the cell of a module, but the cell of a BESS. But I think that one is still a challenging thing. People are going around the world to find the mines of lithium and securing it. It's a big political issue right now. But in quads, the short answer is yes, we can have it.
That's great to hear. So on that note, I mean, I wish we could have taken up more questions, but we are running out of time. So I would hand over the mic back to Mamta.
Thank you, Sabyasachi and Jatin, for moderating the session, and Mayuresh for your presentation. Once again, we thank all our guest speakers for their insightful views. It was a privilege to host you. And lastly, thank you to all the participants for taking the time out and being a part of this CareEdge webinar. For any further queries, feedback, or suggestions, please write to us at the feedback mail. Goodbye for now. Requesting the tech team to kindly log off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you,
everyone
everybody.
for
Thanks a lot,
taking time
everyone.
out.
Thanks a
Yeah.
lot.